Nick, fantastic to have you on the show. How are you today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on.
Hey,
Excited to be here.
Thank you for your book. Thank you for your wonderful book. So, let's do the quick explanation. So, you're following up your hugely acclaimed book, Wild and Crazy Guys, about the best and biggest stand-ups and comic actors of the 80s with this. And I'm going to give it its full title. Last Action Heroes, the triumphs, flops, and feuds of Hollywood's Kings of Carnage. Allow me to do my Letterman moment. There we go. That's your new book. Right there for those watching the video. So for those who can't work it out from the title, what is it about?
It's a pumped up title, but it's about pumped up people. It's it's a kind of spiritual sequel, I guess, to Wild and Crazy Guys, which was about the comedy stars of the 80s and the excess and the amazing films they made, the not so amazing films they made. And I thought, well, where do you go? What is even more crazy than the Wild and Crazy Guys? And it had to be the action stars of that era, because the 80s really was this time when everything was just off the leash. Hollywood was just throwing money at these quite eccentric people who became giant stars. And yeah, it's about Schwarzenegger, Stallone, Seagal, Van Damme, Chuck Norris, Jackie Chan, who's doing his thing over in Hong Kong at the same time, and and their kind of action ilk.
Because it's true, right? I mean, like when anyone in film or anyone outside, film, like when you talk about the greatest action movies ever made, your mind immediately flits back to the 80s and the action movies we saw in the 80s. What were the circumstances in America, in Hollywood at that time that made them produce these kind of, like, as you said, pumped up movies?
Well, similar to the comedy, that explosion of amazing comedy came out of the 70s, which was obviously a really difficult time in America for a lot of different reasons. Vietnam, Watergate. There were the films were reflected in that. You got very dour, kind of quite depressing often films, and the 80s started, and it was like this new period of kind of hope and optimism, and you got this explosion of energy out of it. And in the sense of action, I think definitely Vietnam was an element. You just had America lose a war, which was unthinkable. And so the cinema was a place where they could kind of restore that. And so you saw Stallone and especially Chuck Norris kind of waging these wars and winning and going back to Vietnam even, and getting justice as they saw it.
There's that mad bit in the book where it's Ronald Reagan. I think is he holding up a poster or a T-shirt or something which says Rambo was a Republican. And if you sort of just try and you put that now with a president of America holding up a T-shirt with an action star going, he was on our side. It's kind of mad.
It was totally wild. Yeah, it's the equivalent of Joe Biden suddenly becoming best mates with Dwayne Johnson or Vin Diesel and talking about Fast and Furious in his White House briefings. That's literally what it was. You had Reagan literally hyping up Rambo 3 before it came out. They would call each other on the phone, him and Stallone. He got nicknamed Ronbo. I mean, it was really wild, like the ways in which politics and Hollywood started mixing together, and especially with these action films, because America was having a hard time, and suddenly people were making these movies in which America was glorious again, and you could have one American guy taking down a whole army of Russians, and people really responded to that.
Yeah, it's I mean, these are the movies that you cover in this book are for a lot of us, not everyone, but a lot of us, these are the movies that you go, do you know what should I watch? I want to watch something. And you sort of go, do you know what? I want to rewatch Predator. I want to rewatch Commando. I want to rewatch Die Hard. This must have been quite a fun book to research.
It was. I mean, I started writing it literally a month into the pandemic, so I was stuck at home. Obviously, had the day job, but when I wasn't working on Empire, I was working my way through literal mountains of Chuck Norris. Maybe those ones weren't the most fun, but working my way through action, mountain of action, literally. And it was great fun, I've got to say. I mean, it can get a bit samey when you're on the 17th Jean-Claude Van Damme film and he's doing the splits for the 19th time. I mean, certainly they each found their niche and they kind of stayed in it to an extent, although some of them tried to change their image and move into comedy. You kind of saw that across the board. But yeah, it was really fun. I mean, there's so many iconic films. Predator, Running Man, to the Terminators, Total Recall, the Rambos. I mean, they're just, it's amazing. And these are films they're still trying to make sequels to. They're trying to remake in some cases, but the magic was there in those first films. It's kind of astonishing that over 10 years or so, the sheer number of classics that came out. It's incredible.
I think that the two titans whose shadow is cast biggest throughout the book and biggest in the era are obviously Schwarzenegger and Stallone. And I will say this about the book, because I'm obviously a film fan, so there are stories that I know, but there's so much in here I didn't know about these two and the feud. And I certainly didn't know the story about how it actually began. And it's kind of Stallone's fault.
It usually is. I mean, he was definitely the more proactive of them. You know, I think that's a through line with Stallone through the book. He's a fascinating guy to write about because he's a study in contrast. He's this, you know, big bruising action star, but then he's into poetry and he paints and he's really artistic. But yeah, he definitely became quite envious of Arnold, and it was at the Golden Globes just after Rocky came out, and Schwarzenegger was winning an award for Best Newcomer for Stay Hungry. And they were seated at the same table, and Stallone by all accounts, picked up a vase of flowers and lobbed them at Schwarzenegger's head, which is just an unbelievable way for it to start. But yeah,
and to paraphrase the Usual Suspects, the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was getting Stallone to do "Stop or My Mum Will Shoot," which is amazing that Schwarzenegger did that.
Yeah, well, that was at the peak of their feud, which eventually did cool. But during the 80s, they really hated each other. I mean, they were like competing at the size of their muscles, the size of the knives, how many people they killed in their films. And yeah, the ultimate trick was Schwarzenegger pretending he was really excited about a script for a comedy called Stop or My Mum Will Shoot. And Stallone heard about this through the grapevine. He was like, no, I've got to get it. I can't let Schwarzenegger get another one. And he got it. And it turned out that Schwarzenegger hated the script. He thought it was terrible. And he set that up on purpose to like bait Stallone into doing it. And I got to talk to Ivan Reitman. Sadly, he passed away, but I spoke to him shortly before he died. And he told me that story, and just an incredible, I mean, Stop or My Mum Will Shoot is truly one of the worst films. That was probably the low point. That and Top Dog, the Chuck Norris film in which he teams up with a dog.
Yes. Oh my God.
To fight neo-Nazis.
I mean, Chuck Norris, I found reading about him fascinating because he's a complete blind spot for me. I still to this day don't think I've seen a Chuck Norris movie. I haven't seen Delta Force or, any of the what were they called? Missing in Action?
Yeah, Missing in Action. Yeah. Invasion USA is maybe the most Chuck Norris film of all time, in which, communists invade America, take over a whole city, and Chuck Norris single-handedly kicks them out of windows and they go home. But yeah, he was a bit of a blind spot to me until I wrote an article on him for Empire, and I got to go to Texas, and it was a very surreal weekend. He's still the only person I've ever interviewed who insisted on praying before we started, which was something. And then we went. He had a couple of U.S. Marshals kind of protecting him. Like, he's Chuck Norris. Yeah. Like, why would he need protection? Maybe he was protecting them. But yeah, we went to this mixed martial arts tournament. I drove in his car with him and his wife and his kid, and sat as his guest of honor at this very surreal, violent tournament. And he went on stage at one point to the sound of Prodigy's Firestarter, which is an image I'll never forget. But yeah, he was certainly one of the more one note of them. Like, he essentially didn't act. He just sort of turned up and kicked people. But he was an amazing karate, he was an incredible fighter. He had the skills for real. And his films are they're variable. There is one good one. I will say, Code of Silence. I would say check that one out. It's directed by Andrew Davis, who did The Fugitive and Under Siege. Yes. Really good director. It's Chuck Norris and Dennis Farina as cops in Chicago, and it's genuinely good.
Okay, good.
Genuinely good.
Okay, Code of Silence. I'm writing that down. That's going on my little list. Obviously, one of the movies that you talk about in the book, and one of the stars, the movie that is often quoted as the greatest action movie ever made, is Die Hard. And Bruce Willis certainly feels like something of an outlier compared, I mean, even physically, to the other stars that you talk about in this book.
Yeah, he came out of nowhere, really, and I kind of structured the book around him and around Die Hard to an extent. Die Hard gets its own chapter. It's the only film that does, and it comes exactly halfway through the book. And as I see it, there's before Die Hard and after Die Hard, and it came along and changed everything. And the other action stars started imitating what Bruce did in that, which was to play a more vulnerable, more sensitive, kind of gentler guy. He still kills a lot of people in violent ways, but he was, in touch with his feelings, and he cries and he gets injured. And this was all kind of anathema to Stallone and Schwarzenegger, but you saw even them kind of imitate it. But Bruce Willis was very far down the list of who they wanted for that film, and Fox were looking for a star for that movie for a very long time, and everyone turned it down. And they turned it down because of the character. Like, no one wanted to play this guy who's literally crawling through air vents and running away from the bad guys. It's like, you can't. Stallone would never have done that.
Yeah. Yeah, he's. It's. I remember. I think I'm right in thinking they didn't even want to put his face on the poster because they were like, it just won't sell. He was like a sitcom star moonlighting, and then like and then people started to warm to him, and they were like, redo the poster, get his face on the bloody poster.
Yeah, exactly that. It was so unlikely, and it kind of just shocked everyone. It shocked Hollywood when people really started reacting to it. And there's a story in the book about Schwarzenegger spotting Bruce Willis in a restaurant just after it came out and yelling across the room at him, like, "You'll never be an action star because you've got toothpick arms." And so it's like, he was joking, but I imagine there was an element of truth to that. That he couldn't believe this quite sort of, guy who wasn't giant, didn't spend all this time at the gym, had suddenly come into his territory and succeeded so well.
You mentioned Under Siege a moment ago. Whew! The chapters on Steven Seagal. Wow. I mean, like, here's a guy who was what he was off screen, on screen, by all accounts. And I'd never heard the story that's in the book about how he actually got into like Hollywood in the first place. This confidence trick at the studio.
It's absolutely wild. I mean, because you can see in the book, like everyone else's story, they're especially Van Damme, but even Stallone and Schwarzenegger, they are hustling and they are taking small parts in things and they're working really hard. Seagal just walks into his first film is a vehicle built around him based on his life, or apparently his life. But he was just unbelievable guy to write about, and he's kind of, I guess, sort of the villain of the book. Like, but I genuinely tried to find good stories about him from people, but everyone I spoke to, they didn't really have any. But the stories about him are unbelievable. Like he would claim that he was on, even years into his movie star career, he would claim he had, been on secret missions, or he would. I spoke to the writers of Executive Decision, and he came in one Monday, and they said, "What have you been up to at the weekend?" He said, "I can't tell you; it's classified." So he's just a kind of an unbelievable, and he kind of blurs the lines between his characters and his real life, and I guess he did that deliberately. But he's quite a character.
Yeah, I went down something of a rabbit hole because I think a lot of it has been stripped from the internet. I think you might even mention that in the book, but like his infamous SNL Saturday Night Live performance, the stuff that's still online is just, you're like, this is madness. It's insanity.
It truly is. I mean, I've seen, fortunate or unfortunate enough to have seen the whole episode of that SNL, which is renowned as the worst one, and. Nicolas Cage did a skit a few years on with Lorne Michaels saying, "Oh, I'm the worst person ever to come on." He goes, "No, it's Seagal." So it's like, I think he remains just a man who every molecule of his being is anti-comedy, coming in and nobody could get him to be funny, and he refused to be funny, and I think his ego was so monstrous, he was incapable of making fun of himself. So it was a horrible week for all concerned, by the count.
I will say, reading the book poses a bit of a problem, because you read about Seagal in the book and you're like, oh, man. And then you watch Under Siege and you're like, God damn, it's still good. It's still a good movie. And you've got to do this sort of weird disassociation where you're like, forget, even though it is just Seagal being Seagal on screen, this is a movie. This is like, it's a compartmentalizer.
It's a fantastic movie. And a lot of that's got to do with Tommy Lee Jones. Gary Busey's amazing in it. Andy Davis, as I mentioned, the director of Code of Silence, that was his, he worked a lot with Seagal. He did Seagal's first film, Above the Law, and did Under Siege. I mean, it is a terrific film, but yeah, the stories from behind the scenes, no one enjoyed working with him. And to the point where, the director, Andy Davis, told me that, he kind of worked out that Tommy Lee Jones is on screen more than Seagal. And so you've got literally the villain has more screen time than the hero. And I think they just didn't want to work with him any more than they had to.
One more movie I want to touch on. You've obviously interviewed Steven D'Souza. What a character! A great orator, and a fantastic. I love him. To listen to him in an interview, you would believe he basically created movies. Full stop. But he's brilliant, and Commando in the book. Steven D'Souza, you forget that basically Commando, Steven D'Souza, he created the modern day Arnie movie with that movie, didn't he? Like, Commando was his writing and this idea of the action combined with the quips. That was how we got to know Schwarzenegger for the next decade.
Yeah, and more than Schwarzenegger, everyone started doing the quips, the one-liners. But really, you're right. I mean, it started with Commando, and he saw something in Arnold that other people hadn't seen, and even James Cameron started putting the quips in. But "I'll be back" in the original Terminator wasn't really a one-liner. It was a great line, memorable line. But yeah, it got out of hand, I would say, in some of the films. I'm quite fond of Your Luggage from Eraser, where he shoots the alligator. But Running Man is probably a pun every like 4 minutes. But there are so many great Arnold lines. I mean, he is the master of the one-liner. But yeah, Stephen D'Souza would work with him, and they would run lines, and they would work out the exact wording that would work. And they put a lot of care and attention into those one-liners at the beginning, not always in later projects. But yeah, Stephen D'Souza is an amazing character. I mean, Predator. Sorry, not Predator. Running Man, Commando, Die Hard. He's there everywhere. His fingerprints are all over this genre.
Yeah, and I'm right in thinking Commando was the first time "I'll be back" made an appearance after Terminator, and then it became obviously the catchphrase for the next 30 years.
You had to just keep doing it. How many? Yeah, probably saying it somewhere right now.
My favourite Arnie line, I don't know why, it just always stuck with me, is the bit where he's using the hologram in Total Recall, and he goes, "You think this is..." He laughs first of all. He goes, "You think this is the real Quaid?" It is. Just brilliant. Right, Nick, it's time now to leave this reality and head into the multiverse. We are visiting a dimension of pure film where our virtual cinema awaits. You are our guide. We are your audience. Let's go on a trip to the movies. So we push open the doors to our temple of film and find ourselves in the foyer. There's an excited buzz, as there always is in a cinema foyer, the hum of anticipation. It's your perfect cinema trip, Nick. Who have you picked, living or dead, to go with you?
I mean, there's no choice. I literally didn't think about it. I just went Martin Scorsese. It's like, who else are you going to go to the cinema with? The man, he has seen everything. He'll give you a commentary of whatever you're watching. He'll tell you the history behind the film stock that was used. He's absolutely amazing. I had the privilege for The Irishman, for Empire, a cover story of going to New York and visiting his office and interviewing him there, which was mind-blowing. He had a copy of Martin Scorsese on Martin Scorsese. Martin Scorsese has that. And he's got posters everywhere. And just sitting down and talking to him is just to be schooled. I kind of like to think I know the odd thing about film, but he's just there. And he's just reeling off names of obscure Norwegian films that you're writing down to watch later. And he's just amazing. The amount of energy, the passion he has, I would definitely do that, but probably not a Marvel film. Maybe DC.
Yes, yeah, that famous their theme park rides. I kind of know what he meant though. I kind of get what he was saying. He wasn't saying Marvel's rubbish. He was saying they tick a box, right?
Yeah, I was there. Like, he said it to me.
Right.
My
God.
Yeah. He said it to me, and during that interview, and actually, a lot of people were like afterwards, why did the journalist ask about Marvel trying to start a fight? And it's like, I didn't. I asked a question about de-aging, and said, did you look at other films? And he brought up Marvel himself. He obviously had it on his mind. I think it's not a big surprise that Martin Scorsese's not counting down the days to watch Quantumania. It's not really his thing. And I think he was probably, he's been saying that about blockbuster films for decades. So, but yeah, I'd let him choose.
What's it? Just out of interest, what's his office like? Because I imagine it's just like overflowing with scripts and stuff, or is it? Have I got it completely wrong? Is it not cluttered with movie stuff, and is it really sparse?
No, it's cluttered with movie stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, he has just huge bookcases with amazing books, and he had just had Christopher Frayling, Once Upon a Time in the West book, this big thing. He just had that delivered to him. So he was excited. And but it's just amazing, his energy. He was quoting Midsummer had just come out, or he had just seen it, and he was quoting a bit of Midsummer and kind of acting out afterwards. But yeah, it was a total delight. So to go to the cinema with him would be the best.
Do you have a favourite Martin Scorsese film? Is there one that you sort of go, that's at the top of my list? Because it's quite hard, because there's obviously so many good ones.
There's obvious ones. I will say, this is maybe a controversial view, but I prefer Casino to Goodfellas. In fact, it's definitely a controversial view.
Yeah.
It's more controversial than me saying I prefer Ghostbusters 2 to Ghostbusters, which is another mad view I've got.
Whoa. Really?
Yeah, I mean, I go back and forth a little bit, but I love Ghostbusters 2.
Okay.
I love Ghostbusters 2.
I mean, I like Ghostbusters 2, but it's not Ghostbusters. Is it?
We might need another podcast to sort this out.
Oh, okay.
But what I will say is that I think Vigo is a better villain than Gozer.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
So there are elements in which but I get that it kind of photocopies the first one.
That's really interesting, actually, because, Gozer only turns up at the very end and is sort of like, sort of a weird, and then Vigo, that painting, it's throughout, and it's terrifying.
I find the mythology in the first one quite complicated. It's like there's a lot of exposition, there's a lot of tangled, and it's funny, but Vigo is straight up terrifying.
Okay.
And the pram scene. It's another podcast.
Yeah. Okay, so I feel like whatever your unpopular movie opinion is, it's going to have to be better than Casino is better than Goodfellas, and Ghostbusters 2 might be better than Ghostbusters. So you prefer Casino to Goodfellas?
I'm not saying it's better.
Right.
I just love Casino. I love the operatic nature of it. I love that it's this huge, big 3-hour, amazing. I just think the directing's incredible. De Niro gets more to do. In Goodfellas, he's off to the side a bit. He's right in the middle, and I love that character, Ace Rothstein. Him and Pesci, amazing. I love everything about Casino. So maybe I shouldn't have brought up Goodfellas, but I love Casino.
Hi, thank you for watching this video. I'm going to ask you a small favor now, and it will only take a moment. Please do, if you enjoy the content on our channel, hit that subscribe button. I'll tell you why. It'll only take 2 seconds, and you will be helping us in a huge way, because a lot of the people watching our videos are not subscribers, but if you do subscribe, you'll be helping us grow this channel and get even more wonderful guests to take us on their perfect trip to the movie. So please do hit subscribe. Thank you very much. Enjoy the interview. That's fine. No, that's fine. I've got a slight curveball on Scorsese as well. One of the movies that I don't think is talked about enough as one of his genuine greats is Shutter Island. I absolutely love that film, and it doesn't often feature as when you go, oh, Scorsese, people don't go Shutter Island.
It's really good. It's really intense. I got to say, I remember I have a really visceral memory of watching it at the cinema. I was the only person in the screening room, and I felt it. I physically felt that film. It was so kind of unpleasant and grimy and all about the mind and that ending. So yeah, I'm with you on that.
Okay, good, yeah. Shutter Island, if anyone hasn't seen it, which I think is unlikely, check it out. Right, there's a clock, Nick, on the wall in the foyer. It reads a specific time. What time of day have we gone to the cinema?
This is a tough question. I don't know. I mean, I would happily go to the cinema any time of day, but 7:30 p.m. probably, just because it gives you the chance to watch another film afterwards.
Okay, because this is obviously, like myself, we go to a lot of press screenings. It is the nature of the job. You end up going to press screenings because you have to see films in advance. But a 7:30 p.m. screening at a regular cinema, that's a busy screen. Do you like the communal experience? Do you like a packed auditorium full of people?
No, I prefer if it's just myself and Martin Scorsese. That would be the ideal, but some other people can come along as well. I do, actually. I really like watching a film in a packed room, and you kind of feed off the energy of the audience. And if you're there and it's a new film that no one has seen, I've got a really fond memory of watching Scott Pilgrim versus the World in San Diego at Comic-Con the year it came out, and that was electric. I remember it was absolutely packed, and when that film played, you could just feel the energy in the room, and that kind of was crackling. And so, I like to see it with a crowd.
Okay, good. I honestly hadn't been to the cinema for ages, and then I went to see Barbie on the opening weekend, and it's been so long. And the experience of watching a film in a packed auditorium, as opposed to sort of like a scattering of journalists in a press screening, it's just a completely different experience.
100%. And Commando at the Prince Charles is another one of my favorite ever screenings. People were quoting along, people were cheering, everything that happened. When Arnold lifts that tree trunk up with one hand, people lost their minds. When he feeds a deer, people got even crazier. I mean, that was like constant cheering, and it was amazing.
Brilliant. Right, 7:30, you and Martin Scorsese heading to the cinema. Now, you booked the tickets for us, Nick. Where in the auditorium are we going to be taking our seats?
This is a really boring answer, but halfway back, in the middle. I mean, you don't mess around when it's cinema seats. You don't want to be stuck on the front row. I've had that, and it's the worst thing ever.
Awful.
I've got a vivid memory of watching the Poseidon remake and having to sit in the front row and staring up Kurt Russell's nostrils for an hour and a half, and I don't want to do that again.
I mean, if the Poseidon remake couldn't get any worse than sitting on the front row staring up Kurt Russell's nostrils. Okay, yeah, I mean, it's a solid answer, Nick. It is the most popular seat in the auditorium, halfway up in the middle. All right, the final thing we need before we leave the foyer and start our journey towards the auditorium itself. The air's full of wonderful smells. All manner of snacks and foodstuffs are available at the various counters. What are you choosing to eat?
Again, boring. Popcorn. But salted mixed up with sweet. You don't want to commit too much to one in case you change your mind. But yeah, keep yourself guessing. But yeah, popcorn and full fat Coke. I think I'll go with that. I've learned that nachos seems like a good idea, but when you get in there, it's a terrible idea. It's so noisy. And I once watched Life of Pi with nachos, and it was awful because that film is really quiet for long stretches. And in the end, I had to time it for whenever there was a storm. There's like a storm every 15 minutes, and I'd be like waiting and then just. But yeah, too noisy. Terrible cinema snack. Whoever decided that nachos was a good cinema snack was.
So the only theory I've heard about nachos, because I'm with you, the noise issue is like I don't want to be the person. It gives me anxiety. The idea that other people are like aware of the noise I'm making. But someone suggested that this cheese, this fake cheese that comes with the nachos, acts as a kind of lubricant to the nachos. So you can almost slide them, I guess, whole down your throat.
There's a lot of admin. You're right. You can kind of use that to like counter the crunchiness, but it's a lot of admin. It's a lot of food admin, and you're trying to watch a film, and it's who needs it. But yeah, if you're gonna eat nachos, choose like a very noisy film. Otherwise, you're in trouble.
I mean, I expect to know less from the editor of Empire magazine, the most classic movie snack order in the world: full fat Coke, tub of popcorn. Fantastic. Let's leave the foyer and begin our walk towards the auditorium. Now, I'm going to be putting up posters along this quite bare corridor that depict your most important movie memories. The first poster I'm putting up depicts your fondest movie memory.
I think this is a tough one. I've picked quite a formative one for me. I was at Sheffield University, and in terms of mind-blowing experiences, The Fellowship of the Ring. For the first time seeing it, I was at the Sheffield Showcase. I was already obsessed with the film before I saw it. I was a huge Lord of the Rings fan. I had the illustrated copies with the Alan Lee and John Howe graphic drawings, illustrations, whatever the right word is. And I was so excited to hear that they were involved in the film and they were designing the new films. I was like, wow, this is going to kind of be, is this going to be what I was imagining coming to life? And then the Howard Shore soundtrack dropped a few weeks before the film came out, so I was listening to that on loop. So I went in with the highest expectations. I was like, and also I was a big fan of The Frighteners by Peter Jackson. Not many people are.
No.
I love The Frighteners.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, let's sidebar then. Let's quickly do The Frighteners. I think The Frighteners is almost unwatchable.
Oh, wow.
I genuinely I think it's a bad film. I'm not. I think there's a version. Come with me on this journey. I think there's a version of this film where, because you're told from the start that Michael J. Fox's character can see ghosts and ghosts are real, and then there's a weird scene in the police station where the police think he's faking the whole thing. I think if we got to that point and we, the audience, aren't sure whether these ghosts are figments of like his grief-stricken mind or not, would be kind of interesting. But because we know that they exist from the start.
There's not a lot of mystery, I'll give you that, but I love The Frighteners. I've even watched, there's a 4-hour documentary that Peter Jackson made back when he was, everything he did was 4 hours. He made a 4-hour making of, which I've seen and is incredible as well. But maybe this is my most unpopular opinion, but no, I think The Frighteners is a masterpiece. And Michael J. Fox, so great to see him and Peter Jackson working together. I think it's got a lot of echoes of what would come with Lord of the Rings, like the villain, the Reaper. It's very much like the Nazgul, and I don't think you would have got. And the way he blends comedy and horror and action together, same as Lord of the Rings. So I think you can really see, like, without the Frighteners, you probably wouldn't have got Lord of the Rings. But no, I love that film, and so I went in, and Fellowship of the Ring just blew me away. Like, it exceeded all my expectations. And as soon as I heard that Cate Blanchett narration, I was like, something magical is happening here. Like, what's going on? Like, have they nailed this? And then, yeah, they introduced the Hobbits, they introduced everything, and it just felt so satisfying. We get a lot of, this summer every film seems to be 2.5 or 3 hours long, but you feel like by the end, you're like, come on, just finish. But with Fellowship, it's a 3-hour film that leaves you dying to see the next installment. And I remember coming out that screening the first time I saw it and thinking, we're getting another one of these in a year's time, and then we're getting another one. I couldn't believe it. I was like, elevating.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're absolutely right on all counts. And I do think the only disappointing thing about The Fellowship of the Ring is that last scene where you're like, No. I need to know what. No, I want to carry on. I want to stay in Middle Earth.
I need more walking.
Yeah, I need more walking.
It's not enough. I need to get my step count up.
So, would you say is it your favourite of the trilogy, The Fellowship?
It is. I mean, I love the other two as well. Don't get me wrong. It's not like the others came out and there were disappointments. Helm's Deep is amazing. Return of the King is just ludicrously epic, and it's got some of my favourite bits in. But lighting of the beacons. But Fellowship for me is perfect in a way that very few films are, and it's kind of up there in my favourite films. The Raiders of the Lost Ark, Fellowship, it's up there. But it's so amazing and so masterful, and I love the way he's using CG but practical, together in this amazing way. It's kind of vanished a bit from filmmaking now.
Yeah, and I mean, if you were a fan beforehand, did you ever, as a kid, visit the Ralph Bakshi animated Lord of the Rings?
Never seen it.
Okay,
I've seen enough to know that I might not want to go there.
The craziest thing, because it's like, it's Lord of the Rings, so it's epic. I didn't know Lord of the Rings. I must have been about 5 or 6 when it came out, and it was just the strangest experience for a kid. Someone puts a cartoon on, and you're like, I'm not into this. You're like, it's a cartoon. You're wired to like this. And I remember going, I'm not into this. So yeah, a weird one. I need to revisit it, actually. I haven't seen it for ages. All right, then, we're putting up a poster for the Fellowship of the Ring. So as we continue down the corridor, the second poster I'm going to put up depicts your worst movie memory.
Oh boy. Yeah, again, I don't know if this is strictly the worst, but this popped into my mind straight away, and it kind of ties in with the book. End of Days, Schwarzenegger, late 90s, sorry, and certainly in his kind of decline period. But yeah, there's nothing I like about End of Days. like normally with Arnold, there's something to like. Like Eraser's not a good film, but it's got those amazing rail guns. It's got the alligator stuff. End of Days should have been brilliant. The logline is amazing. It's Arnold versus Satan. I mean, there is no better idea. I want to see that.
Yep.
It has got the line where he says, next to Satan, I make Satan look like a fucking choir boy. It's got that, which is a decent line, but it should have been so much more fun, and it's not fun. And I saw this in Gerrard's Cross, where I saw a lot of films growing up. And the sound cut off in the last 20 minutes of the film, and everyone sat there. No one got up and complained. Like the entire audience just watched the rest of the film, and they just got on with their lives. And it was like nobody cared that there was no sound. It's like whatever. I haven't got the energy to complain about this.
That's brilliant. Oh wow, yeah, I remember that movie coming out because, like you, it was, the build-up was exciting. It was. I think one of the things everyone was talking about was. Because you mention it in the book, the fact that Bruce Willis is a much more vulnerable action hero, and he cried. So, 1988, Bruce Willis cries in his first action movie. Took Arnold 10 years, because that was the thing. Arnold Schwarzenegger cries in this movie, and you're like, oh my God, Arnie cries. We waited a decade for it, and it happens, and you're like, yeah, it's still weird. It's still weird. Like watching Arnie cry, it's like I'm not built to see that.
Yeah, there's a couple of decent films where he plays depressed Arnie. When he came back after his political adventures, he came back and he made Maggie and he made Aftermath. Aftermath especially is very dark and actually he's good in it. But yeah, they're not action films really in the traditional sense.
The action film that he did do that, I probably need to watch it again. If I say this and people go, he doesn't like The Frighteners, but he thinks this is a good film, I might set myself up for a fall. But I thought The Last Stand, where he's the small town sheriff and the crooks come to town, I thought this movie has been lumped in with sort of Arnie's not making great movies anymore, whereas taken outside of that sort of mindset that people had got into, it's not a bad film.
No, it's good. It's a decent film. I wish Johnny Knoxville wasn't in it. I got to say, it was at that period of Hollywood history where Johnny Knoxville was in every film, and I think it could have done without him. But yeah, it's good. I interviewed him for that film, Arnold, and he gave me a sheriff's badge. And it's unclear whether I'm actually a sheriff, but I may legally be a sheriff.
I mean, he was the governor, so he probably, if he gives you a sheriff's badge, it means you are legally a sheriff.
I haven't looked into it, but it's in my sock drawer, and I should look into that.
Yeah, the thing that another thing that excited me about End of Days was Peter Hyams as a director. Just like throughout my life, I've loved his movies. Like they've always been these sort of outlier movies, like Stay Tuned. I was obsessed with as a kid. 2010, I watched that and I was like, I think I like this more than 2001 because it made more sense to me. The Relic with Tom Sizemore. I really rate that.
Well, thank you for making my Ghostbusters 2 is better than Ghostbusters 1 argument look more sane. I appreciate that.
Yeah. And Outland. Oh my God, Outland.
Sean Connery in space. Is, that's great. Yeah. Hyams has got it. He's got it going on.
He does.
Yeah.
He does.
I will say, finally, on End of Days, there's a strange sort of link to Stallone in that there's a very odd pizza moment. Do you remember this in End of Days? Arnold, to signal how depressed he is, his character, he makes a pizza smoothie. He puts a slice of pizza in a blender with some other stuff and then drinks it. And it's almost as odd as the moment in Cobra where Stallone, as his kind of hard-ass cop, takes a slice of pizza and cuts it into a slice with scissors and takes it out the freezer. So it's frozen pizza. It's very, very odd.
Are these basically, have they lent too far into this? This cop is like so either broken or committed to the job. He doesn't have time to eat pizza like a regular person.
He's not got time to D4 pizza. He's not got time for like a knife. He's got to use scissors. I don't know. It's Yeah, very strange.
I mean, Gabriel Byrne. I do the one thing I do rate End of Days for. He's a great devil in it. I think he's fantastic. And the scenes with him at the start where he's just arrived and he's causing havoc, and then he goes into that restaurant and he's really fucking creepy. That's great.
And Miriam Margolyes is in it. You get to see Arnie fighting Miriam Margolyes and killing her.
Oh my God.
My colleague at Empire, Chris Hewitt, did a brilliant feature years ago called Arnie Killed Me, and he just interviewed lots of people who have been killed by Arnold on screen and talked to Miriam Margolyes. It was very funny about that. But a lot of people have been killed by Arnold. There's a lot of choice there.
Yeah. All right, we're putting up a poster for End of Days for your worst movie memory. Right, the third poster depicts the last performance that brought you to tears, Nick.
I saw this film again recently as part of Sundance London. I had already been lucky enough to see it, Past Lives, which is this really wonderful independent film that's coming out soon, directed by Celine Song, who is a South Korean filmmaker who emigrated to America. And it's about a character played by Greta Lee who does the same, comes to America to try and become a playwright in New York. And it's kind of a love triangle, but it's much more complex and interesting than that makes it sound. It's really about her and the guy she married, the American guy she marries, and then her childhood best friend who comes back into her life. And obviously there's real chemistry between those two. It's a really quiet, beautiful film. I just reviewed it recently for Empire and gave it 5 stars. And I thought about it a lot over the last few months. I really love it. And it's there's a scene involving Greta Lee at the end just walking down a street that, when I think about it, I get emotional. Like, it's so beautifully done. And it's an amazing performance. So yeah, that one.
Fantastic. I obviously haven't seen it yet, but yeah, it sounds. Excuse me. It sounds great. It sounds really good. So we'll look out for that. So Greta Lee's performance in Past Lives. We're putting up a poster for Past Lives as the last performance that brought you to tears, and our final poster before we enter the auditorium. So we've both touched on various answers for this already, but what, Nick, is your unpopular movie opinion?
I feel like everything I've said has been an unpopular movie opinion. But I'll lob another one on the pile. I don't like the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. I don't like any of them. And I think that's no longer completely unpopular because I think people have gone off them generally. But I remember reading the Empire before I worked at Empire. I remember reading the 5-star review of the first one, and I was like, I don't get this. Like, what am I missing? It's not that I don't like pirates. I enjoy a pirate movie.
That would be a weird swing. Pirates off the table.
I got to say they should be outlawed. They shouldn't be on the open sea. But no, I even like the Pirates of the Caribbean ride at Disney, but I just find the films too long. Right from the beginning, way too long, bloated, too many MacGuffins, they're not funny, too many boats. I don't really like anything about them. I can kind of see why people like them. I can kind of see why Jack Sparrow became this iconic character, but I find him insufferable. And again, I'm not anti Johnny Depp. Like, I like other Johnny Depp performances, but I find them quite grating, and I would never choose to watch one.
Okay, let's just dig a little deeper. Let's take everything off the table. Dead Men Tell No Tales, On Stranger Tides, At World's End, Dead Man's Chest. Let's put those in the bin, because I think there's a strong argument for them not being good for various reasons. I certainly think towards the later films, the repositioning of Captain Jack Sparrow as less of a sort of sidekick and an outlying character, which just allowed him to do his thing while there was this romance at the core. And he sort of got repositioned as, like, you know, the main guy, and it didn't work for him. It doesn't work for that character. But The Curse of the Black Pearl, it's not. That's the one that I think people are going to go, okay.
You asked for Unpopular.
Yeah.
I give you Unpopular. I will say I do very much enjoy his arrival. The scene where Jack Sparrow is stepping off a sinking boat is a beautiful bit of kind of Buster Keaton-esque physical comedy that works very well. I'll give them that. So I'll give them that 30 seconds, but erase the rest with a magnet. I'm sorry. And I just, Orlando Bloom, I love him in Lord of the Rings, but I don't love him that much in anything else. Yeah. And Keira Knightley, I just don't, not for me.
Okay.
Sorry.
Try wearing a corset. Don't mind. I'm so sorry. Yeah, I'm just going. It's good. Okay. Well, look, it's your unpopular movie opinion. I'm only playing devil's advocate. I just that first, because I think I'm right in saying Johnny Depp got nominated for an Oscar for the performance in that first film.
It was iconic. People loved it, and there have been many impersonators. I'm sure they'll probably make another one at some point. Like, it feels like, it's just going to run and run. That franchise is so popular. But what can I say? I have some films that everyone else loves and you just have some kind of allergic reaction to. And I try to enjoy it and I can't for some reason. And I do like pirates. So I don't know what's going on. I'm going to have to, go see a therapist and figure this out.
Right then. Well, I guess we'll put up a visual representation because you do like 30 seconds of Curse of the Black Pearl. So we're giving it that, but we'll put up just the corner of the poster, the visual representation of 30 seconds. The corner of the poster of the Curse of the Black Pearl is going up as your unpopular movie opinion. Right, let's get into the auditorium. So we push open our final set of doors. Now, there is a queue of people hoping to join you, Nick, and Martin Scorsese in the cinema to watch whatever movie you've picked for us. Are you letting them in?
Yeah, let him in. Why not? I don't want to be besieged and get Marty in trouble. They're very welcome.
Right, the crowd go wild. They pour into the auditorium and start taking their seats, and you and Martin Scorsese take the middle halfway up. So before we get to the movie you've picked for us, we're going to play a few things on the cinema screen, and the first is the trailer for the movie you are most looking forward to seeing in the cinema.
I mean, there's lots of them I'm looking forward to, but this is one that's on my mind at the moment. It's going to be playing at Venice very soon, at the Venice Film Festival, and it's David Fincher's The Killer. And I'm so excited. David Fincher has only made one film in the last 9 years, and that's Mank. And this is him coming back to basics, making a thriller, teaming up with Michael Fassbender, who has been away for 4 years, unbelievably. Like, he kind of took 4 years away from acting, and he's been racing cars and doing things. But he and Fincher have teamed up to make this story about a hitman who is having some kind of existential crisis. The details are quite shadowy. I don't know that much about it, which makes it exciting. Tilda Swinton is in it. It's this globe-trotting thing. And for me, any David Fincher film is a reason to get excited. And him doing a thriller about Hitman, I can't wait. I think it's going to be an event. So I'm excited for that.
That's. I mean, I'm a big Fincher fan myself, and yeah, that is exciting. I guess it must be quite a weird thing. You said, as you just said, you don't know much about it. I'm guessing by the time you watch it, you'll probably know a bit more because it's the nature of your job. You kind of have to know about films. Is it a shame sometimes that you never get that experience of being able to walk into a cinema and not know anything about what you're about to sit down and watch? Because it happens rarely. It's only happened once in my life for the Roger Avery movie, Rules of Attraction, where it was a last-minute screening. I didn't know anything, rushed to get there, sat down, no idea what I was going to watch. And, it's quite a mind-blowing experience, sort of just watching a film unfold in real time.
It kind of depends on the film. I talk a lot about trailers, and some films are very good at misdirection. Dead Reckoning Part 1, the new Mission Impossible film, I thought did a brilliant job of showing you beats from the film, but actually holding back the entire villain and the plot. And so I felt surprised in an enjoyable way watching it. Other things like Indiana Jones, I felt like I went into Dial of Destiny and felt like I'd seen all the beats from all the action scenes already, so that was a bit frustrating. It's just part of the job, unfortunately, but it's a real privilege, I think. We often do set visits, and you get there and they're shooting the end of the film, and you're like, it happens a lot. You're like, what's going on, guys? I can't write about this. But the number of times I've been on a set and there's just like someone getting killed, not for real, for the film, an actor.
It's not 8mm.
No, it's not like a snuff movie, but there'll be, a key third act demise, and you're there with your notebook, just going, well, I can't write about this. So you do often go in knowing more than is ideal, but it's also a privilege, and to get to kind of get that peek into it is exciting. But yeah, we probably will know a bit more. I kind of love not knowing. It's that mystery is really exciting, and then it's almost like the more you learn, the more your imagination, what the possibilities of what the film could be kind of contract a little bit. So sometimes you've got this amazing vision in your mind of what the film is. It doesn't quite match up, but yeah, I'm excited. The other thing I should mention about The Killer is it's Fincher reuniting with the writer Andrew Kevin Walker, who did Seven, which is one of my favorite thrillers of all time. And so those two back together is exciting.
Wow, that's exciting. I did not know that. That's amazing. Yeah. Well, it seems like our David Fincher directed sequel to World War Z is getting even further away then. That's honest. That's one of the most... I only discovered this recently. I knew they were talking about a sequel. I didn't know it was going to be Fincher who was going to direct it. Fincher doing a zombie movie, just there's something so absurd about that sentence that makes me absolutely need to see that film.
Yeah, I would watch it too. I like the first World War Z with two exceptions. I don't like the Brad Pitt's character's called Gerald, which everyone seems to forget, but it's literally an action hero called Gerald.
Right.
And the other thing is, do you remember the scene where his mobile phone goes off on a runway during a special ops, and a load of people get killed? And it's because Brad Pitt hasn't put his phone on silent, and it ruins that film for me, because as soon as the hero does something that stupid, I'm like, well, mate, you deserve to die. Put your phone on silent. At the best of times, when you're in a meeting, put it on silent, but especially when zombies are around you.
Yeah, because I think that's two stupid things that happen in quick succession, because Brad Pitt's phone goes off, and previously the scientist, the biochemist who's going to solve everything, shoots himself dead by accident. So, I mean, that's quite shocking in a good way, but yeah. All right, then, we're playing the trailer for David Fincher's The Killer. So... now, we're going to play on the big screen the movie moment, Nick, that makes you literally or metaphorically, whatever your preference, pump your fist in the air.
It's from Raiders of the Lost Ark. I think most of this film makes me. I mean, if there was footage of me watching Raiders of the Lost Ark, it would be pretty much nonstop fist pumping. But yeah, the opening sequence, which I think is probably my favorite opening of any film of all time. Indy going into the temple in South America to get the fertility idol, and it's just perfect. And what makes it all the more exciting is that Indy just keeps screwing up, and you've got this. You introduce him as the coolest looking hero, but then he just keeps doing slightly dumb things, and that's what's great about that character. Because I think if they lent too much into he's the coolest guy ever and never does anything wrong, like a Steven Seagal movie, you kind of lose, but you lose your sympathy with him. But because he's slightly making the odd mistake, it makes it really exciting. And just the succession of things that happen in that scene in quick succession are so iconic. The big rolling boulder, the darts, the closing door. It's so exciting. And then what I really love is you have the catharsis of him escaping the temple, and then he's immediately surrounded by bad guys and he's back in trouble again. And it's Spielberg at his most masterful and playful, and the music from John Williams is amazing. So yeah, both fists pumping at that point.
That visual gag, I always remember that when he sort of comes over the crest of the hill running away, and you just see him, and then you see the whole tribe of the indigenous people after him, and you're just like, oh, it's
glorious. Yeah, it's glorious. And then he meets up with Jock, the pilot, who I've interviewed, and a guy called Fred Sorensen. A nice bit of trivia is that he was a real pilot who, when they made Jurassic Park, there was a big storm that hit the island and they had to evacuate. He was the guy who flew the plane that flew all the actors and Spielberg off the island, in this emergency kind of operation to get them off before the storm hit. And so there's a really strange link between Spielberg films there.
Oh my God, that is great trivia. That's some hot trivia. I think when it comes to because obviously Indy's gone now after Dial of Destiny, which you didn't love as much as his original films.
It's not up there with the original trilogy for me.
I think when they come to a spin-off, I'd love to see Jock's story. I wish he'd been in it more because it's sort of great, this sort of right-hand man that he's got.
Jock Origins. It's just him fishing for like an hour and a half.
I don't know whether this is because I read your book and I was reading about Chuck Norris and sort of this American sort of like go in and solve everything and reversion. Is there an argument that Belloc, perhaps, when he takes the idol from Indy, he's almost kind of justified because you've got the American archaeologist who's like this action man, like he just wades in, does all the traps and gets out, makes mistakes, but gets out with the idol. But he hasn't bothered to learn the language of the indigenous people, where cultured Belloc has actually learnt their language.
If only you spoke Jovitas.
Right?
He's right. He bothered. He went to he did his night class in Jovitas. And like, maybe that's the spin-off. It's just Belloc like learning this really difficult language and going. I would watch a spin-off of any character from Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's so stuffed with memorable characters and brilliant little subplots. Belloc, he's a smart guy. He just lets Indy do all the work, and then he comes along and just nicks it, takes it. So,
yeah. I remember I couldn't believe that as a kid. I was like, after all, it like really got to me. I was like, that's not fair.
I know.
I was at Comic-Con in London recently, and Paul Freeman, isn't it, who plays Belloc, was sitting next to the actor Julian, who from
Julian Glover.
Julian Glover from The Last Crusade.
Yeah.
They were sitting next to each other at the signing tables.
Oh, that's so cool. I think they were both at the Dial of Destiny premiere as well. I remember getting excited that Walter Donovan and Belloc are like, come on. That's really amazing. I'm a big indie fan. I joined the fan club when Last Crusade came out. I was like 10 or 11, and the fan club lasted 1 month. I may have been the only member. But I remember I did get an Indiana Jones comic book, and I treasure it still.
That's probably worth something now as well.
Yeah, I remember when Last Crusade came out on VHS, I made my dad take me to the video shop an hour before it opened because I was so convinced that there was going to be a huge line of people to get all the tapes were going to be rented. We were the only people. No one else was there first thing in the morning. But yeah, love those films.
Yeah, Last Crusade. It's one of those age-old arguments where there is really no right answer. But everyone's like, "Oh, what's your favorite indie film?" And for me, it's The Last Crusade. They're just adding in Connery to that mix is just it's by far the funniest, and it still delivers in the sort of the indie action stakes as well.
It's glorious. Yeah, it's absolutely glorious. For me, it's Raiders because I love the comedy of Last Crusade, but I think Raiders has got this unique atmosphere where you really feel like you're going into a proper lost temple. Do you know what I mean? Like at the sound, if you go back and just listen to the sound effects, it's so brilliantly done because they were shooting in Hawaii and Rambo 2 shot in now that was going to be Hawaii, but it ended up being Acapulco. But it's really interesting when you get a movie that feels like it's in the deepest, darkest jungle, but actually they're just shooting next to a bar somewhere. And Raiders, just the sense of danger and mystery and the exotic vibes of that opening sequence are so amazing, and it's just a lot to do with the music and the sound, but the way they shoot it as well.
Yeah. I think I've tried to work out what it is about The Last Crusade that I love so much, and obviously the comedy plays a big part, but it's such a bombshell, I think, that is dropped at the very end of The Last Crusade, where you've watched Indiana Jones for 3 movies, and then at the very end, almost the last line, Connery goes, "We called the dog Indiana," and you're like, his name's not even Indiana Jones. He stole the dog's name. His name's Junior. It's amazing.
It's so funny, and the interplay between those two guys, and there wasn't actually that much difference in their ages. I can't remember what it was, but it was like, I'm not even going to guess, but they definitely weren't father and son aged apart, but just having Bond and Indy together, I mean, it's so iconic.
Yeah,
amazing.
Yeah. All right, we are playing the start of Raiders as the moment that makes you pump your fist in the air. Right. Next up, we're going to play what you consider, Nick, cinema's most shocking moment.
Has to be the end of Carrie. I find Carrie one of those horror films. There are horror films that you love and you could watch any time. And then there are horror films that you watch and you're like, right, I'm good now for like 15, 20 years. Like I'm done because they're so upsetting. Carrie is one of those. Like Carrie for me is one that I pop on every now and again when I'm feeling brave because I find it just everything about it is so effective and so brilliantly calibrated by Brian De Palma. And the bucket of blood scene, the Pinot Grigio, like music, it's all works so brilliantly, but it's so intense and so dark and horrible. The scene with the mum and the knives and all that. But the moment I'm choosing for this is the final scene. Carrie's died, she's been buried. So you get Sue Snell, played by Amy Irving, is coming to the grave to put flowers down, and Carrie's hand lunges up and grabs her, and it's still fucking terrifying. And it's so well done, and it's so interesting that it came about because Brian De Palma watched Deliverance, and Deliverance, the Burt Reynolds film, has a scene at the last shot is basically a hand coming up from underneath water. It doesn't make any sense in the context of that film. It's not even a supernatural film. But Brian De Palma watched that and just went, yeah, I can do that better. I can do that better. And he did. I mean, it's amazing.
Oh, I didn't know it was inspired by Deliverance. That's great. Yeah. I know what you mean about Carrie, because she's such a sympathetic character as well. It's like, it's a weird thing. I think, by the time I came to Carrie, I'd probably seen like It, like the Tim Curry version of It, and Nightmare on Elm Street. So I was sort of built for those kind of horrors. A villain is a villain. But then like this weird sort of journey you go on where you're like, well, I'm sympathetic towards her, but she is doing some really bad things. It's sort of, am I cheering this, or is this dark?
Completely. And it's like, is this the hero or is this the villain? And the film doesn't, in a great kind of way of a lot of films of that period, doesn't tell you. It's ambiguous. And that's what makes that film so iconic, I think. You've got such mixed feelings about all of it, and you don't know how to feel, but it's so powerful. And obviously that moment has been ripped off by so many horror films since, but this is still the best in my opinion.
Great stuff. The end of Carrie is the most shocking moment in cinema. So, Nick, next up, we're going to play through the lovely Dolby Atmos speakers the line or piece of dialogue from a movie that most affected you.
I'm going to go back to Fellowship of the Ring, as I often do, and it's got to be the line from Frodo, Elijah Wood's Frodo, I will take the ring to Mordor, though I do not know the way. And I mean, it's just such virtuoso filmmaking that leads up to it. You've got the Council of Elrond, this very, very long scene with a lot of characters, and they're all arguing about, and it's all just exposition, but the way Peter Jackson does it is just delightful, and it's got little comedy moments throughout, and it feels serious but light. And then everyone starts arguing about what they're going to do with the ring, and then you've just got this beautiful shot where you just see it's sort of the curtains sort of, the characters make way, and Frodo's there in the middle, and he's this tiny little character who just says, I'll do it. And I just find that so inspiring, and it's just about courage, really. It's like he's completely ill-equipped to do it, and he doesn't know how he's going to do it, but he's going to do it. He's going to give it his best shot. I find that really inspiring. Don't necessarily play that moment to me before I ever do anything daunting, but I think it's just there in the back of my mind that if Frodo can do this, you can do it. So I think it's like a beautiful moment. And what's great about those Lord of the Rings films is that all the characters really get moments like that. But that's, for me, is the ultimate Frodo moment. I love it.
It's weird, isn't it? And I certainly didn't spot this the first time I watched it, because I hadn't seen the subsequent two films, obviously. But when you've seen the subsequent two films, the expression on Gandalf's face when Frodo says, I'll do it, like face acting wise, Ian McKellen, there's everything in that expression, like the knowledge of what awaits Frodo, the sadness in his eyes that this is going to change Frodo forever. And you're like, that's a weird look the first time you see it, and then you rewatch and you're like, yeah, he knew everything, what was going to happen.
You're right. There's that amazing close-up of Ian McKellen closing his eyes, and he's just looking so heavy. And it's those little moments like that really sell it. Another director wouldn't have included that probably, but yeah, that moment is so impactful, and it's amazing. It just kind of recharges that whole film, and then you're like thundering into the second half of it. Yeah, it's great
stuff. I will take the ring to Mordor, though I do not know the way. Right, the final thing before we get to the movie you have picked for us is the best use of music in a movie.
This was another very, very straightforward one for me. It just jumped straight into my mind. I listened to this music a lot. Metallica used to, I don't know if they still do, but they used to play this at the start of their gigs. It is the most amazing, and it's Ennio Morricone's Ecstasy of Gold. I do not know the Italian title for it, but it has an Italian title as well. From The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And it's just operatic. I defy you to listen to it and not feel like you're going to run around looking for gold. And it's just, you got the three characters, the good, the bad, and the ugly, all together in this in this sort of space, and the music plays, and it's them just running around for ages. On paper, that probably didn't sound like it was going to be an amazing set piece, but it's really just the film just pauses for this music to play, and it is absolutely electric. It's so amazing. I want to listen to it right now.
Right. Well, we are listening to it in the virtual cinema. Oh, wonderful. Glorious. It has set us up. It has put this packed auditorium, Martin Scorsese and yourself, in the mood for the movie you have picked for us. The movie, out of all others, Nick, you have decided to screen for us in our virtual cinema tonight. What are we watching?
We're watching another film called The Killer. We saw the trailer for a film called The Killer. Now we're going to watch another film called The Killer. Again, like, there could have been a million films that I could have screened, but I love John Woo. I'm writing a book about action and not writing about John Woo, although Hard Target is in there, his collaboration with Jean-Claude Van Damme, which I'm very partial to, but not going to screen that. It's got to be one of his Hong Kong films before he came to Hollywood. And for me, it's between Hard Boiled. He made so many great Hong Kong films. He made Better Tomorrow Part 2, Bullet in the Head. But it's got to be either Hard Boiled or The Killer. And I decided to write, in Empire, we do a section called Masterpiece, and I decided I was going to write about a John Woo film, and I literally spent 2 years trying to deliberate between Hard Boiled and The Killer. And I was like, which one am I going to pick? And I went back and forth, and I ended up doing Hard Boiled, and I kind of regret it. Because for me, The Killer is, even though Hard Boiled has got some of the greatest action and him holding the baby who then pees on him to put out fire, which is genius. For me, The Killer is a perfect film. I love it so much. It's not just the action, it's the emotion of it and the beautiful shots, the operaticness. I think it's just pure cinema. And it's a film, if you haven't seen it, it's Chow Yun-fat playing this hitman in Hong Kong, and he's hired to do a hit. He accidentally blinds this woman, and so he is trying to help her get her sight back for a cornea transplant. And it is just total carnage, but in the most amazing, beautiful way. And you're watching it and just going, this is poetry, but it's also just men shooting each other. The church, it ends, no big spoilers, but it ends with a big set piece shootout in a church. And I don't know, it's just got these shots of statues of the Virgin Mary and candles, and it's so sort of, it could have been so indulgent and ridiculous, but it's not. It's completely stunning and has some of the greatest action you'll ever see. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's often described as one of the greatest action movies ever made, and it's got those John Woo motifs, obviously, that, I'd seen. By the time I got to The Killer, I'd seen Face Off and Mission Impossible 2 with the doves. Those blooming doves. They're so. Who knew? Who knew that doves would make something so poetic?
He loves a dove. He loves a dove. I interviewed John Woo once and asked him about, there's a CG dove in Mission Impossible 2. Like, even in Mission Impossible 2, he wanted a dove, and I asked him, about that, and he said, I wanted to use a real one, and they wouldn't let me because it's like it's flying through a fireball. And I was like, dude, I don't know if the dove would have made it very far. Yeah, but for like you, those were my kind of entry John Woo films, Face Off, and then I discovered his Hong Kong stuff. But really, part of the reason I've chosen to screen this is just it doesn't get shown enough. And in a fair world, in a just world, The Killer and Hard Boiled would be on the big screen all the time. People would it would be a part of your education. You have to go and watch it. But they're hard to get hold of. They're not even easy to get hold of on home end. They're not on the streaming services. Not really good Blu-rays. There's some rights stuff. But they are absolute gems, and I'd love to see The Killer on the big screen. I've never seen it on the big screen.
Oh, really?
No,
wow.
No, never.
Fantastic. Well, this is an amazing movie to screen on the big screen here in our virtual cinema. And just because I think this is probably going to be the only time this ever happens in the history of the podcast, let's mention a third movie called The Killer, which is obviously the upcoming. I read an interview with Charles Roven, the producer, this week, saying it's not a remake, it's a different take on The Killer, but I think there's some DNA of The Killer, but John Woo is returning to remake The Killer.
Yeah, because one film called The Killer coming out is not confusing enough. Yeah, he's it got shut down because of the strikes, but they shot most of it in Paris. I think they said, I read the same interview, I think they said it's like 2 weeks left of filming. I'm very excited to see what he does with it. He's changing it up. It's a female character playing instead of the Chow Yun-fat character, it's Natalie Emmanuel from Game of Thrones. And I'm very excited. It's like if Peter Jackson suddenly went back to doing a horror film like he started out with. I'd be very excited to see what he comes up with. But yeah, John Woo is going back to his roots, and he hasn't made enough films lately. But I am hoping he's still got the magic, and I can't wait to see what he comes up with.
Yeah, it's certainly exciting because it was what was it, 2003? Paycheck was his last American movie. And now he's got this coming out, The Killer, a remake of The Killer, and then this. I'm only reading about it ahead of this interview. This one with Joel Kinnaman, a completely silent action movie, which sounds great.
Bring it on. The artist with with a higher body count, I guess. But no, John Woo is totally unique. I don't think anyone has ever matched the kind of the level of ballistic poetry or whatever, however you want to frame it. There's even a video game based on The Killer and Hard Boiled. I'm forgetting the name of it now, but I've played it and it's quite good fun, and it has got doves in it, in case you're wondering.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I'm gonna look that up afterwards. Well, that's it, Nick. The curtains have closed. The guests are milling out, smiling, chatting, and thanking you for taking them on this incredible night out at the movies. But before you go, it's time for our mystery question as we ask, what's in the box? So, your mystery question this week, you've got a triple-parter, Nick. Lucky you, this is a first as well. So, your book, The Last Action Heroes, you've gone on the ultimate deep dive into the 80s action stars. So, Nick, if I, appropriately enough, put a gun to your head and demanded to know answers to the following questions, what would you say? The greatest action movie hero of the 80s, character not actor. The greatest action movie villain of the 80s, character not actor. And, of course, the greatest action movie of the 80s, putting The Killer to one side because you've already covered that. So let's start with the greatest action movie hero of the 80s, character not actor.
Wow. Okay, and it's got to be the 80s, not the 90s. It's got to be the 80s.
We're on brand here. We've done a deep dive into the book. If you really want to do a 90s one, I mean, I'm interested to hear it now because the fact that you've lent that way already is interesting.
I'm gonna go with a slightly left field one I might regret, but I'm gonna go with John Matrix from Commando. I love his ridiculous name. For me, he represents the ludicrous excess of the 80s as well. I mean, obviously you've got Terminator's not a hero. You've got John McClane, who's obviously iconic, but in terms of like setting that template of the one-man army, and just doing it in the most joyful way possible. I love John Matrix. I love that he picks a phone booth up with like one hand, as I remember it. I love that he likes eating ice cream with his daughter. He's got everything. He's a very well developed character, a very realistic character. But yeah, like you said, he originated the Arnold one-liner, so he kind of blazed a trail in a big way. And his name is John Matrix. No human would ever be called John Matrix. It's the worst character name of all time, but also the best one. So I'm going to pick that.
Oh yeah, and he's got a sense of humor. That bit with David Patrick Kelly, where he's like, "Hey John, you said you'd kill me last. I lied." Fantastic, best line in the movie. All right, John Matrix is the greatest action movie hero of the 80s, the greatest action movie villain of the 80s.
No question, Hans Gruber. No question. Yeah. I mean, amazingly, Alan Rickman's first film role.
Crazy.
Can you believe it?
Crazy.
And he just brought everything. I mean, he's so sophisticated, but just smart. You totally buy that this guy has a plan for everything. He's got plans within plans. He's unruffleable, and he's thought everything through. I don't know how he's recruited his henchmen. I would love to see a spin-off about his vetting, his recruitment process. But you just buy that this guy is, and you kind of want him to win, weirdly.
I know.
You want him to win. He's so likable and enjoyable to watch. But then John McClane is obviously a brilliant foil to him. But yeah, Hans Gruber, without question.
You know, I rewatched Beverly Hills Cop for the first time recently, and I think there are elements of Stephen Burkoff's performance in that as Victor Maitland that have made their way into Alan Rickman's performance. Alan Rickman is a better villain, but there's a little bit of a crossover of DNA there. Interesting,
yeah, and everyone was. I mean, it was so imitated in turn by everyone else, and Powers Booth. I'm quite fond of Powers Booth in Sudden Death, the Van Damme film, where they take over his Die Hard in an ice rink. It really is that. And he said he took. I spoke to him about it once, and he said he took that role because of Hans Gruber in Die Hard, and he said the material wasn't there. Although he does threaten to stuff spiders into a little girl's mouth at one point, which is a very strange threat. But everybody was trying to do, Jeremy Irons in Die Hard 3, and everyone was trying to do what Rickman did, but no one could.
No, it's a special performance. Right, the big one then. The greatest action movie of the 80s, Nick.
Oh, my God. Oh, my gosh. That is a big one.
It's a big one.
That's a big one.
It's a big one. It's something that may be carved into marble in the future.
I mean, if I can't go into the 90s, so for me, it's between Terminator 2 and Die Hard. And Terminator 2 is into the 90s. So if we're just sticking to 80s, I'm going to say Die Hard. I think, like I said, it changed the action genre completely. It has comedy, it has thrills, it has incredible action. The camera work's amazing, incredible iconic performances. It's unbeatable. And they kept making Die Hard films and they couldn't get close. Although I have a very partial to Die Hard 3.
Really?
Yeah.
I watched 3 again recently, and it's the whole, because wasn't that a script called Simon Says initially that then was reversioned as a Die Hard movie? It was an action movie that they repurposed, which I think 4 was as well, wasn't it?
And two. They were all of the Die Hard sequels started out as different things, different properties that they kind of turned into Die Hard films. 2 was based on a novel. There wasn't a Die Hard, wasn't by the writer of the book that Die Hard was based on. But there was going to be a Die Hard on a boat, which would on a cruise ship, which would have been interesting. But yeah, they were kind of looking at all the disaster movies and patching Die Hard onto that. So, Tower Block, Towering Inferno, Airport. So they were going to do a Poseidon Adventure one. I quite like the third one, but Jeremy Irons isn't a patch on Gruber, but it's got some great moments in it. But just in terms of just the concept being so clean, you've got a bunch of terrorists stuck in a building. How do you get out? And it has so much fun with that concept.
Yeah. Well, we've listed so many unpopular opinions. It's good to end on a popular opinion. Die Hard is the greatest action movie of the 80s. Wow, that is it, Nick. Your taxi has arrived to ferry you back to reality from our virtual dimension of film. But before you go, let's recap your perfect night out at the cinema. You have gone with the great Martin Scorsese at 7:30 p.m. You were sitting halfway back in the middle, and you were having the classic order of popcorn, sweet and salted, with a full fat Coke. We are putting up a poster for your fondest movie memory of Fellowship of the Ring. Your worst movie memory is The End of Days, but the blessing in disguise was the last 20 minutes were without sound. The last performance that brought you to tears was Greta Lee in Past Lives, and your unpopular movie opinion is there is no good Pirates of the Caribbean movie. In the auditorium, we are going to be playing the trailer for David Fincher's The Killer, followed by the moment that makes you pump your fist in the air, Indiana Jones escaping from the temple at the start of Raiders. The shocking moment is the end of Carrie when her hand pops out of the ground. The line of dialogue is from Fellowship of the Ring, I will take the ring to Mordor, though I do not know the way. And the best use of music in a movie, Ecstasy of Gold from The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, before we watch John Woo's 1989 movie, The Killer. Nick, thank you for taking us on a trip to the movies. Have you had a good time?
I've had a great time. That sounds like a pretty good night, I gotta say. Night. Yeah. I'm going to cancel my plans for tonight. Let's do it.
It's a fantastic night. And I will say once again, a fantastic book, The Last Action Heroes. It's out on the 24th of August, available to pre-order now. If you're an action movie fan, and even if you're not, it's a fantastic read. So thank you for bringing that into the world as well, Nick.
Thank you so much. This has been really fun.
Cheers, mate. Thank you so much for watching this interview. I'd love it if you would check out some of the other interviews on our channel. They're all fascinating and unique trips to the movies with some wonderful, wonderful guests. And if you would like to find out more, do hit us up on our social channels. We are at Trip to Movies Pod. That's at Trip to Movies Pod on all social media with lovely content on there. And you can get in touch with us if you so wish. Thanks again.